All right, in this video, we want to talk over another one of the organic molecules that make up much of living things. And in this video, we want to talk about nucleic acids. So like with the other videos, we'll talk about the nucleic acid function. We'll think about the structure, what it's made out of, and what some examples and what functions they perform in living things. So let's go ahead and begin. So nucleic acids are these molecules that we don't think about like we do with the other molecules, the carbohydrates, the proteins, and the lipids, because we don't see nucleic acids listed on nutritional labels for our food very often. But nucleic acids are critically important molecules, and we'll see that nucleic acids are found in every cell, right? So we'll talk about why in just a second. So we've got an image here of a couple kinds of nucleic acids, and so we'll go over the information and hopefully we'll understand that by the end of the video. So let's start by thinking about what nucleic acids do. So nucleic acids serve two primary functions. The first is that nucleic acids perform information storage. So specifically, our DNA inside our cells stores information about how our cells can perform functions, right? So all the information a cell needs is in its DNA. The second function that nucleic acids perform is to move that information around. So as we go through the course, we'll talk about how information is used in different places in the cell. And it's the job of RNA, another kind of nucleic acid, to move the information from one place to another inside the cell. And that's it. Well, those are the main functions we'll consider: information storage and information transport. There's two kinds of nucleic acids we'll talk about, DNA and RNA, and they each perform one of the functions. So again, we'll be talking about DNA versus RNA. So there are some other differences here besides the function, and so we'll look at why those differences occur, or what creates those differences. All right. So for every organic molecule, we've been talking about the monomer subunits that we build these large molecules out of. Nucleic acids are also built out of monomers. The monomers that we build nucleic acids out of are called nucleotides. So we'll think about what nucleotides are. Nucleotides all share a common structure. If we look at a nucleotide, nucleotides have three parts that are attached together to make a nucleotide. Those three parts are shown here in this simple chemical diagram. So the first part that all nucleotides have is this phosphate group. When we talk about the replication and manufacturing of DNA and RNA later in the course, we'll see how important that phosphate group is. Okay, so every nucleotide has a phosphate group. Then in the middle, there's this sugar. There's a ring structure. There's one sugar in here, and it's either a deoxyribose sugar or a ribose sugar. And we can talk about how to tell those apart later on in the course. So every nucleotide has a phosphate, and then it has a sugar in the middle. And then the last piece that every nucleotide has is this base part up here. Sometimes that gets called a nitrogenous base because it contains so much nitrogen. The base is the part that gives the nucleotide its identity. So every nucleotide has this structure: phosphate group attached to a sugar, attached to a base. But there are 5 different kinds of nucleotides. So we'll look at the structures of these 5 different nucleotides. We give them names: A, T, G, C, and U. Hopefully you've heard of those letters before when you've heard people discuss DNA. So here's another image that demonstrates the differences between these 5 nucleotides. So over here we've got another diagram showing the nucleotide structure. Again, there's a phosphate group, there's a sugar in the middle, and then there's this base up here. So it's this base part that changes, and it can be any one of 5 different structures, and that's what gives our nucleotide the identity of being either an A, a T, a G, a C, or a U. So if we look in this box right over here, we can see the different structures that are shown for those specific nucleotides. Again, A, T, G, C, and U. So you can see that each base has a slightly different structure, and that's how it gives the nucleotide its identity. The only other thing I'll point out in this diagram is the difference between deoxyribose and ribose sugar. You can look at these two sugar diagrams. They're really similar. I'll just point to one spot, this atom right here, where in deoxyribose it's just a hydrogen atom, but over here in the ribose sugar, it's a oxygen and a hydrogen together, a hydroxyl group. And that's what differentiates deoxyribose from normal ribose. So we'll think about that later on. So those are the monomers of nucleotides, of nucleic acids, right? And so again, nucleic acids are just polymers of those nucleotides. Okay? So if we take a whole bunch of these nucleotide structures and we connect them together into a long chain, we make what we can call a polynucleotide or a nucleic acid. So our examples of nucleic acids, DNA and RNA, will contain these long strings of these nucleotides attached to one another. All right, so let's just briefly talk over those two specific examples of nucleic acids that we talk about in biology. And the first one are these DNA molecules. DNA, you can see from the heading, stands for DeoxyriboNucleic Acid. Okay. So DNA forms this structure. Oftentimes this is referred to as the double helix. And DNA's job is to store information. So this molecule, the DNA double helix, contains all the information that cells need to carry out their functions. We can see another thing about this DNA double helix is that it contains two strings of those nucleotides. So each one of these ribbons that is twisting around one another is one string of nucleotides. There's a second here, and those two strings are interacting with one another through what we'll call base pairs. Base pairs are when A's bind with T's or when G's bind with C's. Okay. And it's in that molecule, again, that cells can store all their information. So I think for now that's all we should understand about DNA structure. So let's move on to RNA. RNA stands for ribonucleic acid. Again, it's missing the deoxy part. It has that oxygen. We'll talk more about that later. So RNA is ribonucleic acid. And here's a picture of ribonucleic acid. You can see it looks a little bit different. It's got just one strand, one string of nucleotides. And you might notice a difference in the nucleotides that we use to build it. So as a reminder, RNA transports information. RNA is capable of moving information around inside the cell. RNA is different than DNA in that it's single-stranded. You can see in this picture. And then the last difference we'll point out is that RNA uses the nucleotide U instead of the nucleotide T. So we've got that U nucleotide right here. That U nucleotide only shows up in RNA. We don't observe it in DNA. So that's all the information we should keep in mind right now for these nucleic acids. They're built out of nucleotides. We can make two different kinds, DNA and RNA. They have slightly different functions, and they have slightly different structures. And later on in the course, we're going to talk a lot about how we make DNA, how we copy that information, we make sure that information is safe. And then we'll also talk about how we make RNA so that we can move that information around when we need it. But we'll add a lot more detail then. So we'll stop there. As always, let me know if you have any questions, and I will speak to you again soon.